My name is Marian Brooks, and I'm 62 years old. All my life, I believed that family was the one thing that never turned its back on you. But that belief shattered the night my own son raised his hand against me, while his wife laughed. If you're listening to this, don't scroll away just yet. Stay with me, because this isn't just another sad story. It's a lesson about what happens when love turns into control, and silence becomes your sharpest weapon. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, in an old brick house on Lenox Avenue, the one I once dreamed would hold 3 generations of laughter. Now, its walls remember screams, broken glass, and a truth I never wanted to face. Sometimes, blood isn't thicker than peace. That night changed everything. It turned me from a mother into a witness, from a victim into someone dangerous in her calm. Before I tell you how I got my revenge, not with fire or fists, but with a stack of legal papers, I want you to ask yourself one thing. What would you do if the people you loved most became your enemies? Stay with me, because this story is only just beginning. It was a Sunday evening in Atlanta, one of those warm nights when the air smells like magnolia and rain. I'd spent all afternoon cooking my son's favorite, seafood gumbo, thick and rich, just the way David liked it when he was a boy. The table was set. Jazz played softly from the radio, and for a moment, I let myself believe things were still good. David walked in first, handsome as ever, but tense, his eyes heavy with something unsaid. Then came Tiffany, in her bright silk dress, smelling like expensive perfume and quiet judgment. She kissed the air near my cheek, not me, and handed me a cheap bottle of wine with a smile too sweet to trust. "For my dearest mother-in-law," she said, knowing full well my blood pressure didn't allow me to drink. We sat together, the 3 of us, pretending to be family. Tiffany bragged about her new jewelry line. David scrolled through his phone, and I just kept stirring my spoon, tasting nothing. There was laughter at that table, but it wasn't real. It was the kind that comes before a storm. And deep down, I already knew. Something was about to break. Halfway through dinner, I made the mistake of speaking. Just a small comment about the leaky faucet in the kitchen. "David, honey, it's still dripping. You might want to take a look when you have time." He didn't even glance up from his phone. "It's not your kitchen, Ma," he said flatly. The words hit harder than I expected. Before I could answer, Tiffany let out a soft laugh, the kind meant to wound. "Oh, David, she's just not used to being a guest in her own house." Her tone was sugar wrapped around poison. I felt my stomach tighten. I'd sold my old apartment years ago to help them buy this place, thinking I'd live here peacefully till my last breath. Now they spoke as if I was some burden they were forced to carry. I tried to hold my dignity, to swallow the rising heat in my chest. "It's just a faucet," I whispered. That's when David slammed his hand on the table, the silverware jumping like startled birds. "Don't tell me what to do in my house," he shouted. And for the first time in my life, my son looked at me not with love, but with rage. The sound of his palm against my cheek came before I even saw it coming. Sharp, hot, final. For a second, the world went quiet. Just the jazz record spinning in the background and Tiffany's soft, cruel laughter, filling the space where love used to live. I didn't scream, didn't fight back. I just sat there, feeling the sting spread across my skin, the weight of 37 years of motherhood collapsing in a single moment. David's chest rose and fell, like a man who had just won something. Tiffany leaned back, sipping her wine, her eyes glinting with satisfaction. It was in that moment I understood. I wasn't part of their family anymore. I was their reminder of everything they wanted to erase. So I stood, quiet and steady, wiped my tears, and walked to my room. Inside that silence, something inside me hardened. Love cooled, pain froze, and I made myself a promise. They would never see me break again. I wouldn't scream for justice. I would sign for it. Because sometimes the loudest revenge is written in ink, not in anger. That night, Atlanta was silent, the kind of silence that hums after a storm, thick, heavy, almost holy. I sat on the edge of my bed, the taste of blood still sharp on my tongue, the echo of his hand still ringing in my ears. My son. My only son. I touched my cheek. It burned like shame and fire all at once. The clock ticked softly in the corner, steady and cruel. From the living room came the faint sound of Tiffany's laughter, that sharp, brittle sound that had haunted my house since the day she arrived. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to let them know what they had done. But I didn't. Because anger, I learned long ago, is a language they don't understand. Silence, however, silence gets under their skin. The lamp beside me flickered, its warm light washing over the dresser, where a single drawer sat slightly open. Inside, hidden beneath old letters and my late husband's watch, was the original deed to this house. My house. I stood and walked to it, my hand trembling only once before I reached for the paper. The edges were yellowed, the ink faded, but those signatures, those names, were clear as truth. He'd said he owned this home. He'd said I was lucky to stay. But this paper said otherwise. I sat back down, the document in my lap, and for the first time since his hand struck my face, I smiled. Not a smile of revenge, not yet, but of awakening. I see you now, I whispered to the empty room, and you're not going to win. Outside, thunder rolled again, distant but low, like the earth itself was taking my side. Before I went to bed, I made a promise to myself. No police, no screaming matches, no begging. My justice would come quietly, legally, beautifully. And if you're watching this, if you've ever felt powerless in your own home, remember this. Silence can be power, if you know when to break it. Don't turn away. Stay with me. Because what happened next changed everything. The next morning, the mirror didn't lie. My face was a map of last night's violence. Purple shadows blooming under my right eye, the faint outline of a hand across my cheek. For a moment, I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. She looked older, colder. But behind those bruises was something new, something alive. I wrapped a scarf around my head, put on my old gray coat, and slipped out before they woke. The air was damp and heavy, with that early Atlanta chill that seeps right through your bones. My bus ride downtown was quiet, filled with the hum of the city waking up. Car horns, coffee shops opening, the rhythm of life that didn't pause for heartbreak. I was headed to Jeremiah Cole's house. my late husband's old friend, a retired lawyer who had seen more truth inside a courtroom than most people see in a lifetime. When he opened the door, he was still in his robe, coffee mug in hand. His eyes widened when he saw my face. "Good Lord, Marian," he whispered, "what happened to you?" "I need your help," I said simply, stepping inside before my courage could fade. His home smelled of books and old wood, like comfort wrapped in dust. He gestured for me to sit, and I laid the manila folder on his table, the one I had kept hidden for years. He put on his glasses, flipping through the papers with the careful hands of a man who knows the weight of words. The silence stretched until finally he looked up. "The deed's in your name," he said slowly. He never completed the transfer. It was never notarized. The words hit me harder than any slap. I blinked, unsure whether to cry or laugh. "So, legally, it's still mine?" Jeremiah nodded. "Yours, and yours alone." For the first time in months, I exhaled. The air felt lighter, the world wider. He studied me for a long moment. "What do you plan to do, Marian?" I smiled, not the gentle kind I used to give when I was trying to keep the peace. This one was sharp, certain. "I'm going to take it back," I said, quietly, permanently. Jeremiah leaned back, rubbing his chin. "You always were your husband's kind of woman. Steady, but with steel underneath." "I learned from the best," I replied. He poured me a cup of coffee, strong and black, the way my husband used to make it. "You sure about this?" he asked. "This kind of justice, it doesn't come easy." I met his gaze. "It doesn't have to. It just has to be mine." When I left his house an hour later, the sun had finally broken through the clouds. It wasn't warm, not yet, but it was enough. As I walked toward the bus stop, the wind carried the faint scent of magnolia from somewhere nearby. Familiar, hopeful, alive, and for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't feel like a victim walking away from pain. I felt like a woman walking toward her plan. "Fanhai, iba, quang bontram na moitu." That evening, I came home before they did. The sun was already low, bleeding orange across the windows of the house I had built with my own hands, the one they now called theirs. The air inside was still, almost sacred, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting to see what I would do next. I walked through each room slowly, touching the things that had once meant love. Framed photos, my husband's old armchair, the kitchen counter where I used to roll out biscuit dough every Sunday morning. None of it felt like mine anymore. It was a museum of my sacrifices, curated by people who never valued them. On the dining table, the silverware still lay where they'd left it after dinner. I picked up one fork, polished it absent-mindedly, and smiled. A small, bitter smile. This house has seen everything, I thought. It'll see justice, too. Upstairs, I opened the drawer of my nightstand and pulled out the manila folder I had hidden years ago. The original deed to the house, signed in my name. The paper was yellowed, fragile, but more powerful than any slap, any insult, any cruel word Tiffany had ever whispered. I spread the documents across my bed, the sunset light catching the edges of the pages like fire. No screaming, no fighting, just signatures and silence. That's how I would take it all back, Later that night, I called Mrs. Evelyn Porter, the real estate agent Jeremiah had recommended. She was a sharp woman, efficient, discreet, the kind who didn't ask questions she didn't need answers to. "Can you sell a house in a day?" I asked. There was a pause, then a chuckle. "Honey, if the price is right, I can sell it before lunch." We set a meeting for the next morning. I hung up the phone and stared at the darkened hallway. From the living room came faint laughter, their laughter, my son's voice, Tiffany's cruel, delighted giggle. But I didn't cry this time. I just listened, memorizing the sound, because I knew it would be the last night I'd ever hear it. When I finally went to bed, I didn't dream of revenge. I dreamed of silence. The kind that comes when you finally decided to stop surviving and start reclaiming. In that silence, I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a woman planning her own deliverance. The next morning, I woke before the sun. The house was quiet, that heavy kind of silence that feels like a warning. From the hallway, I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator and the steady tick of the kitchen clock, the same clock that had measured years of my patience. I moved carefully, every step deliberate, as though the floors themselves were watching me. In the soft light, I could still see the faint outline of last night's bruise beneath my makeup. But today wasn't about hiding. Today was about acting. I brewed a pot of coffee, the bitter aroma filling the air like courage. Then I sat at the kitchen table, waiting for the sound I had memorized for years. His car pulling out of the driveway, followed by Tiffany's heels clacking down the steps. When the door slammed shut behind them, I finally breathed. The first call I made was to Evelyn Porter, the real estate agent Jeremiah had connected me with. She answered on the first ring, her voice brisk but kind. "This is Marian Brooks," I said. "I'm ready to sell my house." There was a pause. "You mean today?" "Yes, today." By 10 o'clock, she was there, a tall woman with auburn hair and the calm energy of someone who had seen every kind of client. She took one look at me, then at the house, and nodded. "We'll make it happen." While she made her calls, I moved through the rooms like a ghost setting her own spirit free. I took only what mattered: my husband's photograph, the deed papers, my Bible, and the blue shawl my mother had knitted before she passed. Everything else I left behind. By noon, the buyers arrived, a young couple expecting their first child, eyes bright with hope. They didn't know the story of this house, and I didn't tell them. I just smiled, shook their hands, and signed the papers that made the sale official. When it was done, Evelyn turned to me. "It's a clean deal," she said softly. "They can move in tonight." I nodded, the weight in my chest beginning to lift. As I walked out the front door, I didn't look back. The house stood there in the sun, quiet and proud, unaware that its walls had just witnessed the softest act of rebellion a mother could make. No shouting, no tears, just justice, wrapped in silence and sealed with a signature. That day, I didn't lose a home. I reclaimed my freedom. The night I left Atlanta, the city didn't look the same. The streets that had once held my memories now looked like strangers. Too bright, too loud, too full of ghosts that whispered my name. I waited for the midnight bus at the Greyhound station, a scarf hiding my bruises, my suitcase small enough to fit beneath my seat. I'd packed lightly, 2 dresses, a photo of my late husband, a few books, and the deed that changed everything. I didn't need more than that. When you've lost your home, your pride, and your peace, all you really want is space to breathe. The bus hissed as it pulled up, its headlights cutting through the fog like a sign from heaven. The driver, a heavy-set man with kind eyes, took one look at me and didn't ask a single question. Maybe he'd seen too many people running from something. As we left the city behind, the skyline disappeared in the mirror. I thought of David, his anger, his silence, his hand across my face, and Tiffany's laughter echoing like a broken hymn. For years, I'd sacrificed everything to keep a family that didn't see me as family anymore. But somewhere between Atlanta and New Orleans, I realized I wasn't running away. I was returning to myself. The road stretched endlessly ahead, dark but honest. The sound of the tires against the pavement became my lullaby, steady and certain, like the heartbeat of freedom itself. I watched the world slip by, gas stations glowing in the dark, sleepy towns lit by neon diner signs, couples holding hands under streetlights that flickered like promises. Every mile carried me closer to something I hadn't felt in decades. Possibility. When the bus finally crossed into Louisiana, the air changed. It smelled of salt and jazz and rain, that sweet New Orleans perfume of life and struggle mixed together. Out the window, I saw the lights of the French Quarter twinkling in the distance like a city built on second chances. I leaned my head against the glass, the reflection of my tired face merging with the passing lights. My cheeks still bore the faint shadow of David's hand, but I no longer touched it in shame. That mark was proof I had survived. As dawn began to break, the driver called out, "Next stop, New Orleans." And for the first time in a long, long time, I smiled. Freedom didn't come with fanfare or fireworks. It came quietly, on a bus full of strangers, in the stillness between one heartbeat and the next. If you've ever had to leave behind everything familiar just to save your soul, then you already know. Sometimes peace doesn't wait for you to find it. You have to get on the bus and go meet it halfway. When the bus rolled into New Orleans, the sky was just beginning to blush, a soft orange glow creeping over the Mississippi. The air was heavy and sweet, like syrup and smoke, the kind that sticks to your skin and makes you feel alive again. Waiting by the station gate was Gloria King, my best friend from high school. Even after 40 years, I would have recognized her anywhere. She was still radiant, wrapped in a gold shawl, with a voice that could melt glass, and a laugh that filled the air before she even spoke. "Marian Brooks," she said, pulling me into her arms. "Lord, look at you. You look like you've been through hell, and still walked out shining." I smiled for the first time in weeks. Maybe hell's what it took to start over. Gloria lived above a small jazz club in the Treme district, the kind of place where the walls sweated history. Downstairs, a trumpet always played somewhere, sometimes slow and mournful, sometimes bright and wild. She handed me a spare key and said, "Stay as long as you need." The city's got a way of healing folks who've been broken. The first night, I slept under her old quilt, listening to the music drifting up through the floorboards, saxophones weeping, laughter spilling into the street, the sound of glasses clinking like forgiveness. For the first time in months, my body unclenched. My breath came easy. The next morning, Gloria made chicory coffee so strong it could wake the dead. We sat on the balcony overlooking the street, watching people pass. Street artists, lovers, dreamers, the kind of souls who seem to live between yesterday and tomorrow. But peace has a way of feeling fragile when you've lived too long in fear. Every phone ring made me flinch. Every footstep in the hallway made my stomach tighten. Tiffany's face haunted me like a bad memory that refused to stay buried. On the third evening, as I washed the dishes, Gloria came in holding my old phone. "It's been ringing all day," she said. "Same number." My heart skipped. "Who is it?" She turned the screen toward me. Tiffany. I stared at that name for a long moment, the letters glowing like poison. I didn't answer. I just pressed power off and placed the phone face down on the table. Gloria raised an eyebrow. "You think she's gonna let it go?" I shook my head. People like her never do. Control is their favorite drug. That night, as Gloria sang below, her voice smoky and defiant, I stood by the window watching the rain fall over the quarter. The neon lights reflected off the wet pavement, shimmering like a new beginning. Somewhere inside, I knew Tiffany's story with me wasn't over. But for now, New Orleans wrapped me in its music and its mercy. And for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Not the fragile kind you pray for, but the kind you earn by surviving. A week passed before I noticed something was off. At first, it was small things. The same black sedan parked across from Gloria's building 3 nights in a row. The feeling of eyes on me when I walked down Bourbon Street to buy groceries. In New Orleans, it's easy to mistake curiosity for attention. But this wasn't curiosity. This was watching. One afternoon, I caught a glimpse of a man sitting in that sedan. He wore a baseball cap pulled low, pretending to scroll through his phone. But when our eyes met in the reflection of a shop window, he looked away too quickly. My chest tightened. I turned down a side street, my footsteps echoing faster than they should have. By the time I reached Gloria's door, my hands were shaking. She noticed immediately. "Girl, what's wrong?" she asked, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. "There's someone out there," I said, "watching, waiting." Gloria frowned, peeking through the curtain. "You sure it's not just nerves?" "You've been through a lot, honey." "Maybe," I whispered, though I didn't believe it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every car passing by made my pulse race. I got up, turned on the porch light, and stared out the window. The sedan was still there. Its headlights blinked once, like a warning. The next morning, I called Jeremiah from a payphone near the corner store. I didn't want Tiffany tracing my location through my cell. He answered on the second ring. "Marian, what's going on?" "I think Tiffany's trying to find me." "There's someone following me." Jeremiah sighed deeply. I was afraid of that. I heard through a contact that she's hired a private investigator. She's trying to claim the house sale was fraudulent. She's desperate. I laughed softly, bitterly. Desperate people make dangerous decisions. "Stay put," he said. "Don't confront anyone. Let me handle it." When I hung up, I stood for a long time under the bright Louisiana sun, watching people move through their day. Vendors calling out, children chasing pigeons, couples holding hands. Life went on, unaware of the quiet war moving beneath it. That evening, I sat on Gloria's balcony with a cup of coffee, staring at the street below. The sedan was gone, but the unease wasn't. I realized then that running had never been about distance. You can cross 1,000 miles, but if someone's determined to drag your name through the mud, they'll find a way. Still, I wasn't that same woman from Atlanta anymore. I wasn't broken, and I wasn't afraid. I turned off the porch light and whispered into the warm night, "Come find me if you want, Tiffany. But this time, I'll be ready." And for the first time since that Sunday dinner, I didn't feel hunted. I felt dangerous. That night, New Orleans was restless. The wind howled off the river, rattling the shutters of Gloria's apartment. Downstairs, someone was playing a trumpet, a slow, aching tune that sounded like heartbreak dressed in brass. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee gone cold, the papers spread out in front of me, photos, receipts, and the deed that had started it all. I had run as far as I could. I had been silent long enough, and now silence felt like complicity. Gloria padded into the kitchen in her robe, her hair wrapped in a scarf. "You're up again, baby? Can't sleep?" I looked at her over the rim of my mug. "No, I'm done sleeping through things that matter." She studied the stack of papers and understood before I said a word. "You're going to report it, aren't you?" I nodded. If I don't, she wins. He wins. Every woman who stays quiet loses. Gloria reached over and squeezed my hand. "Then let's get it done." The next morning, I put on my best dress. Not to impress anyone, but to remind myself who I was before they tried to erase me. The bruises had long faded, but the memory hadn't. I wanted the police to see the woman behind the scars, not just the victim. The station was small, tucked between a pawn shop and a bakery. The air smelled of coffee and dust. A young officer greeted me with polite confusion, as if unsure why an older black woman in pearls would be there at all. "I'm here to file a report," I said firmly. "Domestic assault, financial fraud, intimidation." His expression shifted from surprise to respect. He guided me to a seat, slid a notepad across the table. "Tell me everything." So I did. The Sunday dinner, the slap, the laughter, the silence that followed. My son's voice, the one that used to call me Mama, raised in rage instead of love. I handed over the photos Jeremiah had helped me take, the doctor's report from that night, the deed proving the house had always been mine. When I finished, the officer nodded slowly. "We'll open an investigation, ma'am. And I'm sorry you had to go through that." Walking out into the sunlight, I felt lighter than I had in months. The wind off the Mississippi caught the edge of my scarf, tugging it gently, as if the city itself was exhaling for me. That night, back at Gloria's, we sat on the balcony drinking sweet wine, listening to the city's heartbeat, the music, the laughter, the sirens. "You did it," Gloria said softly. "You really did it." I smiled. I didn't do it for me. I did it for the next woman who's too scared to. Below us, a street performer started playing a blues melody so soft, it almost sounded like a prayer. I closed my eyes and let it wash over me. That night, for the first time since Atlanta, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt like I was fighting back, with grace. The courtroom in downtown New Orleans was colder than I expected. The kind of cold that seeps through your skin and settles in your bones, reminding you that justice doesn't care about warmth. It cares about facts. I sat quietly at the plaintiff's table, hands folded in my lap, watching the door. When it opened, David and Tiffany walked in, side by side, but not together. His eyes were downcast, his suit wrinkled, his pride thinner than I remembered. Tiffany, on the other hand, looked like she'd spent all night rehearsing a performance. Hair perfect, lips sharp red, every inch of her shouting confidence she didn't own anymore. When she saw me, she smiled. "Didn't think you'd actually show up, Miss Marian," she whispered as she passed. I met her gaze. "That's your problem, Tiffany. You think I'm the same woman you hit from behind, but I don't stand behind anyone anymore." The judge called order. My attorney began presenting the evidence. The photographs of my bruised face, the police report, and most damning of all, the short recording from that Sunday dinner. The room went still when Tiffany's laughter filled the speakers, sharp and cruel. Then came David's voice, raised and trembling with anger. "Don't tell me what to do in my house." And finally, the sound none of us could escape. The slap. People in the audience gasped. Tiffany's smile cracked like glass. When my attorney finished, the judge turned to them. "Do you have anything to say?" David tried. His voice broke halfway through. I lost my temper. I didn't mean to." But Tiffany cut in, her tone venomous. "She provoked him. She wanted this drama." The judge slammed his gavel once. "Mrs. Brooks didn't provoke a thing. The evidence is clear. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just sat there, feeling the air shift, the weight of silence turning in my favor for the first time. When it was over, the judge ruled in my favor. My ownership of the house was confirmed, and a restraining order was issued against both of them. The words echoed in my mind like a church bell. "You are free." Outside the courthouse, the press waited, cameras flashing. One reporter asked, "Mrs. Brooks, do you feel vindicated?" I looked straight into the lens. "I feel peaceful," I said simply, "because sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it just whispers, 'You're safe now.'" As I walked down those courthouse steps, the Louisiana sun warm on my shoulders, I realized that this, not the sale, not the silence, was the true moment I got my life back. And for anyone who's ever been hurt by the ones you love most, remember this: you can lose everything and still come out standing taller than they ever thought you could. After the verdict, I didn't feel like celebrating. Justice doesn't always taste sweet. Sometimes it's quiet, almost bitter, like strong coffee left too long on the stove. A week later, Jeremiah called. His voice was low but steady. "It's over, Marian." They dropped the appeal. Tiffany's gone, packed her things and left town the next day. "Where'd she go?" I asked, though part of me already knew. Chicago, maybe. Somewhere with new faces to fool. He hesitated before adding, "David, he's not doing well. Lost his job, his savings. His car got repossessed last night." I sat there in silence, staring at the lace curtains swaying in the afternoon heat. I didn't feel joy or pity, just an odd stillness. the kind that comes when a storm finally passes and you realize how quiet the world can be after chaos. People think revenge is fire, that it burns bright and wild, but in truth, it's ice. It freezes everything until there's nothing left to feel. Later that evening, I found myself walking past the courthouse again. The steps were empty, the same sun falling across the marble where I'd stood free just days ago. For the first time, I let a tear fall. Not for them, but for the version of me that had loved them too much, too long. That woman was gone now. In her place stood someone new. Someone who could breathe without permission, live without apology. When I got home, I poured a glass of sweet tea and sat on the porch, listening to the cicadas hum in the distance. The air was warm, forgiving. I whispered into the night, "Lord, I don't wish them harm. I just wish myself peace." And as strange as it sounds, that peace finally answered back. The money from the sale and the court settlement sat quietly in my account for weeks, untouched. It wasn't wealth. It was redemption in numbers. Every dollar felt heavy, not with guilt, but with responsibility. I didn't want a new car or a big house. I wanted meaning, something that would make the pain worth carrying all this time. One humid afternoon, as I walked through downtown New Orleans, I stopped in front of a weathered brick building on Basin Street. The windows were cracked, the paint faded, but there was a wide front porch and an old magnolia tree leaning toward it, like it was guarding something sacred. A faded sign read, "For Lease." The moment I saw it, I knew. That building had the same tired strength I saw in the mirror every morning, battered, but still standing. That night, over gumbo and cornbread, I told Gloria about my idea. "I want to open a place for women like me," I said. "Somewhere they can sleep without fear. Somewhere they can start again." Gloria smiled, her eyes shining. "You sure you ready for that, baby?" "That's a lot of work." I nodded. "I'm not just ready. I'm called." Within a month, with Jeremiah's help, I signed the lease and named it Second Chance House. We painted the walls a soft yellow, the color of hope. The front porch was fixed, the rooms filled with donated furniture. Gloria brought her old record player and stacks of vinyls. Billie Holiday, Etta James, Nina Simone. "Every queen deserves a soundtrack," she said, laughing. The first woman arrived on a rainy Tuesday night, a young mother with a black eye and a little girl clinging to her coat. She didn't say much, just asked, "Is it safe here?" I smiled and opened the door wide. "It's home," I said. Soon, more women came. A nurse whose husband controlled every cent she earned. A grandmother who'd been thrown out by her own children. A college girl too ashamed to tell her family what her boyfriend had done. Each story broke me a little, but built me a lot. Every evening, I cooked dinner for whoever stayed. Gumbo on Sundays, red beans and rice on Mondays. We'd sit together around a long table, and for the first time in a long time, laughter lived there. Real laughter, the kind that heals. Sometimes I'd walk through the halls late at night, listening to the soft murmur of women sleeping peacefully. I'd stand on the porch, breathing in the scent of magnolia and rain, and whisper a prayer. For every woman who's been told she's too old, too weak, or too late, may this be your beginning. One day, a volunteer reporter from a local paper came by, curious about the shelter. After hearing our stories, she asked, "Miss Marian, why did you call it Second Chance House?" I thought for a moment and smiled. Because sometimes life doesn't give you one. You have to build it yourself. A week later, the article ran on the front page of the community section. Donations started arriving. Volunteers, too. A retired carpenter fixed our roof for free. A church group brought mattresses. A cafe owner donated fresh bread every Friday. Watching it all come together, I realized something powerful. I hadn't just rebuilt my life. I'd created a refuge where pain could turn into purpose. And as I stood under the magnolia tree that evening, the golden light spilling over the porch, I whispered to the wind, This is my true revenge, turning my suffering into someone else's salvation. For the first time in years, I didn't just feel free. I felt useful. It was a humid Thursday evening when I saw him again. The sun was low, bleeding orange over the rooftops of New Orleans. I was sweeping the porch of Second Chance House when a car pulled up across the street. A dented blue sedan, engine coughing like an old smoker. When the door opened, David stepped out. He looked smaller, not in size, but in spirit. His once proud shoulders were hunched, his clothes wrinkled, and his eyes carried the kind of emptiness you only get after losing everything: money, pride, and the illusion of control. "Mom," he said softly, walking toward me. I froze. That word had once been the sweetest sound I knew. Now, it sat heavy in the air. "I didn't come to fight," he continued. "I just wanted to see you. To say, I'm sorry." I leaned the broom against the railing. "You said that before, David." The night in court. But sorry doesn't undo pain. It only acknowledges it. He nodded, tears glinting in the fading light. "I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I lost everything. And I realize now, I lost the only person who ever stood by me." For a long moment, we stood in silence. Mother and son, separated not by distance, but by choices. "I built this place," I said, gesturing toward the building behind me. "For women who've been through what I went through. I don't hate you, David, but I can't be your home anymore." He lowered his head. "I understand." As he turned to leave, I called out, "David." He stopped. "I still pray for you," I said. He gave a small, broken smile. "Then maybe there's hope for me yet." When his car disappeared down the street, I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The porch light flickered on, bathing the steps in soft gold. I whispered to the night, "Sometimes love survives by learning how to let go." The evening of my book launch felt like a sunrise after a lifetime of storms. The little bookstore on Magazine Street was glowing, its front windows lined with candles, soft jazz playing from a record player in the corner. Outside, the New Orleans air was thick with the smell of rain and magnolias. Inside, people murmured softly, flipping through copies of my book, The House on Lenox Avenue. My name gleamed across the cover in gold. I stood near the back, watching the crowd gather. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from something deeper: disbelief. A year ago, I was packing my life into a single suitcase. Tonight, my story sat in the hands of strangers who had come to listen. Gloria was the first to spot me. "There she is," she called out, her voice bright and proud. "Our Miss Marian, the woman who turned pain into poetry." The room erupted in applause. I smiled, though my eyes burned with tears. As the host introduced me, I walked to the small podium in the center of the room. My knees felt weak, but my spirit stood taller than ever. "Good evening," I began, my voice steady, despite the pounding in my chest. "When I first started writing this book, I didn't intend for anyone to read it. It was a confession, a way to make sense of everything that happened inside a house that used to be my home." The audience leaned forward. I could feel their quiet attention, the kind that doesn't just listen, it witnesses. I wrote about fear, about silence, about love twisted into something unrecognizable. And I wrote about what happens when you stop surviving and start choosing yourself. A soft hum of agreement rippled through the crowd. "This story isn't just mine," I continued. "It belongs to every woman who ever gave more than she received, every mother who stayed one day longer than she should have, and every soul who ever mistook loyalty for love." For a moment, the room was silent. Then a woman in the front row whispered, "Amen." Another nodded, tears sliding down her cheek. I smiled, taking a deep breath. I called it the house on Lenox Avenue because that house was more than wood and brick. It was a cage and a classroom. It broke me, but it also taught me what strength really is. And strength, I said, glancing toward Gloria, doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes it looks like walking away. The room burst into applause again, loud, real, electric. Afterward, I sat at a small table signing books. People came up one by one, some crying, some shaking, most just saying, "Thank you." Each signature felt like closing another wound, one that didn't belong to me alone. When the last person left, I stood in the quiet glow of that bookstore, holding the final copy in my hands. I wasn't just an author. I was living proof that even the most broken chapters can be rewritten beautifully. A week after the book launch, a small package arrived at Second Chance House. Inside was a handwritten note on old stationery that smelled faintly of lavender. "Dear Miss Marian, I read your book 3 times. Each word felt like you were sitting beside me, whispering, 'You can still start over.' My name is Loretta Miles. I'm 70 years old, and because of you, I finally left my son's house last night." I read that line over and over until the words blurred through my tears. That afternoon, Loretta showed up at the shelter, tall, elegant in her own way, wearing a faded church dress and holding nothing but a leather purse and a trembling smile. "You're even stronger than I imagined," she said softly when she saw me. I guided her inside, poured her tea, and listened. Her story was heartbreakingly familiar. A retired teacher whose son had taken control of her pension, her bank account, even her phone. "He said it was to keep me safe," she whispered, "but safety started feeling like prison." When she read my book, she said something inside her snapped, not from anger, but awakening. "If you could do it at 60, I could do it at 70. We both laughed, and for the first time, she didn't look afraid. Over the next few weeks, Loretta settled into one of our spare rooms. She joined the other women at dinner, humming old gospel hymns as she helped wash dishes. The light came back to her eyes. One evening, she told me, "I've always wanted to live near the sea, maybe in Savannah or San Diego, somewhere the wind doesn't sound like someone watching over me." I smiled. "You will, Miss Loretta. This time, it'll be your house, not anyone else's." She took my hands, tears shimmering. "Your book didn't just save my life. It gave me permission to have one." That night, as she slept peacefully down the hall, I realized something profound. My story had stopped being mine. It had become a map for women finding their way home. It happened on a humid Thursday night in Baton Rouge. The auditorium lights were low and golden, the kind that makes every face glow a little softer. I had just finished my speech, a talk about survival, strength, and what forgiveness really means. The applause was still echoing when I saw her. Tiffany. She stood at the back of the hall, her posture sharp as a blade, her eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses, even though we were indoors. My breath caught, but only for a moment. Time didn't stop. Not anymore. I'd learned how to let it move right through me. As the crowd quieted, she walked forward. The sound of her heels against the floor was the only noise in the room. When she reached the microphone stand in the aisle, she pulled off her sunglasses. Her makeup was perfect, but her eyes told a story of sleepless nights and something she didn't know how to name. "So, this is what you've become," she said, her voice trembling between anger and disbelief. "A saint for women who can't keep their men in line." A low murmur rippled through the audience. The moderator started to move toward her, but I raised my hand. "Let her speak," I said calmly. Tiffany's lips curled into a bitter smile. "You think you're better than me? You humiliated us. You made us look like monsters." I took a step closer, my voice steady. "I didn't make you monsters. I just stopped hiding what you did." Her expression faltered for just a heartbeat. I saw it. The crack in the armor, the woman beneath all that cruelty and control. "You ruined my life," she spat, though her tone had lost its venom. "No, Tiffany," I said softly. "You ruined your own when you chose hate over humanity." The room fell silent. You could have heard a tear hit the floor. Someone in the audience began to clap, one pair of hands, then another, until the entire hall filled with applause. Not for me, but for truth. Tiffany froze, her eyes darting toward the crowd, then back to me. For the first time, she looked small, not weak, just lost. She turned, her heels echoing again, and left without another word. I stood there, still as stone, letting the sound wash over me. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I wasn't that woman from Atlanta anymore. When the applause faded, I leaned toward the microphone and said quietly, "Forgiveness isn't for the one who hurt you. It's for the one who survived." The audience rose to their feet, and in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. Tiffany wasn't my villain anymore. She was just another woman drowning in her own silence, and I had finally learned how to stop sinking. When the door closed behind Tiffany, the applause slowly faded, leaving a thick hush in the air. I could still hear the echo of her heels fading down the hallway, like the last notes of a song that had played too long. The audience was waiting. Hundreds of faces turned toward me, their eyes wide, some brimming with tears, some with questions they were too afraid to ask aloud. I stepped back to the microphone, my heartbeat steady now, my breath slow. I wasn't planning to say this tonight, I began, my voice calm but full. But maybe this moment is exactly why I came. Every word felt heavy and alive in the air. I didn't write The House on Lenox Avenue to make villains out of anyone. I wrote it because silence almost killed me. The silence of fear, of shame, of pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. A few women in the front row nodded. One reached for the hand of the person beside her. I thought for a long time that revenge meant making someone else hurt, as much as they hurt you. But I was wrong. Revenge isn't about destruction. It's about redemption. It's about building something beautiful from what tried to destroy you. The crowd was completely still now. Even the air seemed to listen. When I sold that house, it wasn't just a property I was letting go of. It was a life I no longer recognized, one built on control, guilt, and fear disguised as love. I didn't burn it down. I walked away, and that, my friends, was the loudest revenge of all. A few people clapped quietly, but I raised a hand. Don't clap yet. Because what came next was harder. I took a deep breath, feeling the lump rise in my throat, but refusing to let it silence me. I learned that forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It doesn't excuse it. Forgiveness simply means saying, you no longer get to control how I remember myself. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Soft, emotional, raw. I get letters from women every week, I continued. Mothers, daughters, wives, all asking the same thing. How did you find the courage to leave? And I tell them this. I didn't find courage first. I found dignity. The courage came later, when I realized I was worth saving. A woman in the middle row wiped her eyes. Another whispered, Amen. I know some of you came here tonight carrying stories heavier than mine, I said softly. Maybe it's not a slap or a bruise you're healing from. Maybe it's the quiet kind of hurt, the one that makes you feel invisible. But I'm here to tell you, you're not invisible. You are not what they did to you. You are what you survived. The lights above the stage glowed warmer, almost golden. It felt like the room itself was exhaling. I smiled then, slowly. When I started Second Chance House, I thought I was helping women find shelter. But I realized we weren't just rebuilding walls. We were rebuilding souls. Every woman who walks through those doors carries a story, and every one of them teaches me the same lesson. Strength doesn't roar. It whispers. I looked toward the back of the room, where Tiffany had stood minutes ago. That woman you saw just now, I said, my tone steady, once had power over me. But now, I only feel compassion, because hurting people hurt people. And if you spend your life holding on to hate, you're still tied to them. Forgiveness is what cuts the rope. For a moment, no one moved. Then slowly, a woman near the aisle stood up. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, the entire room was on its feet. A sea of applause, of tears, of light. I felt my own tears fall. But they weren't the old kind. Not from pain, but from release. Thank you. I whispered into the microphone, voice trembling but full. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing. As I stepped away from the podium, the sound of the crowd rose like thunder, filling the hall until it felt alive. Gloria, who had been sitting in the front row, met my eyes and mouthed the words, "You did it." And I knew she was right, not because I'd won, but because I'd let go. That night, as I left the building, the air outside felt lighter. The moon hung low over the river, and somewhere in the distance, a saxophone played a slow, sweet tune. I stopped for a moment, looking up at the night sky. Forgiveness, I thought, doesn't mean forgetting what they did. It means remembering who I am after. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. 2 years later, the world had slowed down. Or maybe I finally learned how to walk at the pace of peace. I now lived in Savannah, Georgia, in a small white house with blue shutters that faced the ocean. The mornings smelled of salt and magnolia. The evenings of rain and jasmine. Every day began the same. A pot of coffee, the sound of waves hitting the rocks, and Marley, my caramel-colored dog, chasing seagulls he'd never catch. People in town called me Miss Marian from the coast. They didn't know my story. Not really. To them, I was just the older lady who baked sweet potato pies for church fundraisers and read poetry at the library on Fridays. And I liked it that way. My past no longer introduced me. My peace did. But even here, far from Atlanta, far from the house that once held my pain, traces of my old life found me in letters. Women from all over the country sent handwritten notes, telling me how the house on Lenox Avenue had changed them, how they'd found courage to walk away, to speak up, to start again. Sometimes I'd read their words aloud on my porch, letting the sea breeze carry them off like prayers. And though I had built something beautiful out of what once broke me, I never forgot the road that led here. The courtroom, the shelter, the faces of the women who taught me what strength truly looks like. I'd often sit by the water at dusk, watching the tide pull back, leaving the sand glistening and clean. That's what healing felt like to me. The quiet returning after the storm. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't surviving. I was simply living. And in that stillness, I found something deeper than happiness. I found home. One quiet afternoon, I heard a car crunching up the gravel road. Marley lifted his head from the porch steps and barked once. Not his warning bark, but a curious one. When I looked up, I saw David stepping out of an old pickup truck. He looked older, weathered, lines deeper around his eyes, hair flecked with gray. But there was a softness there I hadn't seen since he was a boy. "Hi, Mama," he said, his voice barely above the breeze. For a moment, I couldn't speak. That word, Mama, carried so much weight, it almost broke the air between us. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was my late husband's wedding ring, the one I'd thought was lost when I left Atlanta. "I found it while cleaning out storage," he said quietly. "I figured it belonged with you." I took it, feeling the cool metal against my palm. "Thank you," I said. "He'd be glad you brought it home." We sat on the porch in silence, the sea wind tangling his hair, like it used to when he was a child. "I'm not here to ask for anything," David finally said. "I just wanted you to know." "I'm trying, Ma." "I'm learning." I nodded, watching the horizon turn gold. "That's all I ever wanted, son. For both of us to learn." When he drove away, the light lingered longer than usual. Soft, forgiving, and for the first time, I felt no ache, no anger, just a quiet kind of love that had learned to let go. Every week, my mailbox filled with stories. Not bills, not advertisements. Stories. Letters from women in places I'd never been. Detroit, Charleston, even as far as Anchorage. Some were written in neat cursive, others on lined notebook paper smudged with tears. They all began the same way. "Dear Miss Marian," one woman wrote, "I left the man who called me useless. I read your words, packed my bag, and walked out before sunrise." Another said, "I'm 68, and for the first time in my life, I'm living alone and happy." I kept every letter in a wooden box under my window. Sometimes at night, I'd sit with a cup of tea and read them aloud to the rhythm of the waves outside. The wind would carry their voices across the ocean, stories of courage, of pain, of rebirth, until they blended into one endless chorus of strength. It amazed me how pain, when shared, could turn into power. My story had traveled farther than I ever could. Through paper, through whispers, through women who refused to stay silent any longer. One line, from a woman named Celeste in Baltimore, stayed with me the most. "You made me believe that freedom doesn't have an age limit." Every time I read that, I smiled, because that was the truth, the gift I never knew I was giving. My story wasn't just about revenge anymore. It had become a movement of beginnings. Sometimes, when I stand on my porch at dusk, watching the sun melt into the sea, I think about how far I've come, from fear to freedom, from silence to strength. I used to believe revenge meant making someone else hurt, but now I know. True revenge is peace. It's waking up every morning in a life that's fully yours. No fear, no permission, no apology. The past didn't disappear. It just stopped holding me hostage. And that's the lesson I want to leave you with. You don't need to destroy what broke you. You just need to stop living under it. So, let me ask you something. If life handed you the same pain, would you choose to fight it or rebuild from it? If my story touched you, if you've ever had to start over from the ashes, hit like, share this story, and tell me in the comments, what does starting over mean to you? And don't forget to subscribe, because somewhere out there, another story is waiting to remind you. It's never too late to begin again.